Welcome to Haverchat, a leadership podcast where we explore the principles, the stories, and the people that shape great leadership. Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Wiesenberg, and I am the Chief Culture Officer here at Havercamp Group. And today we have a very exciting and historic episode of Haverchat as we discuss the roles that leaders play in creating a winning culture. Joining us today are Nick and Zach, Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld. They are the co-founders for CultureCon, and their mission is to create and inspire positive change in organizational culture. And what makes this so historic today, gentlemen, is that you are our first two guests outside of Havercamp Group, and you're also our first virtual recording. So how does it feel to be a part of history today, gentlemen?
It's an honor and a privilege.
So humbled. I want to thank Zach. I want to thank our parents for putting us in this position today. Yep. Mm-hmm. Midwest, born and raised. Yep.
Yes.
Truly excited and grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah. All right, Todd.
Oh, you're welcome, gentlemen. I appreciate you accepting the invite, obviously. But before we dive into our main conversation, I would love our audience to hear from you. Just your story, your origin story. You know, who were Zach and Nick before CultureCon, and then just take us up to where we are today. And this is very conversational, so whoever wants to go first can go.
Nick, kick us off. Tell us about pre-CultureCon, Nick.
Okay, yeah. So let's see. So I went to school for business marketing. And I had it in my mind that I was going to pursue a career in marketing research because I was always fascinated with social anthropology and consumer psychology and just why do people behave the way that they do. And I think those are still kind of the underpinnings of what makes Nick tick. So I think you can probably see the correlation to how it gets into organizational culture. But yeah, my early career was doing a lot of let's say marketing, operations management, certainly a lot of sales experience over the years. But it wasn't until I started working for an organization called Farwell, which is a management consulting group based in Madison, Wisconsin. In fact, it's the office I'm sitting in right now because I feel like their office backdrop looks a lot better than a dingy basement. That is often the case when I'm doing video for CultureCon. But no, working at Farwell, I over the years as the company continued to grow, we were at about probably around 50 or 60 consultants where we decided to put more investments towards our own organizational culture strategy and employee experience design. So I was very grateful and humbled to be entrusted kind of with that task and creating the initial building blocks that the culture could be built upon. And it was right around then when I met Zach, who can tell you a little bit more about what he was up to at that time. But this was around, I would say, 2016, 2017. And through Farwell, I was building a couple different groups. I would call them communities of practice around shared interests related to change management, organizational culture, project management. So I'd already started to get my hands dirty a little bit in, let's just say, community building. But I had never envisioned what Zach was cooking up with the kind of the early stages of CultureCon. So I'll let him tell his story.
Yeah, my background, I've always been an entrepreneur. My mom jokes that I had the most successful lemonade stand on Longmeadow Road growing up. So I've been an entrepreneur since I was very young. Went to school for sport management. I was really interested in sports and the business side of the sport industry. So went to school up at Minnesota, got to work for a lot of the teams in the Twin Cities area, like the Gophers, the Twins, the Timberwolves. Came back to Madison. I worked a summer for the Madison Mallards, kind of like a summer collegiate baseball team. I was a marketing intern, but I pulled pork. I painted the outfield walls. I had to tackle a streaker one game. It was a summer to remember. It was a lot of work. And I realized I didn't want to be in sports anymore, at least at the entry levels. So I just kind of did a couple other random jobs. in kind of the business side of taking my business skills to different industries, and then started a few more companies. In 2014, roughly, I got connected to my two future co-founders of a company we started called Third Space, which was a cloud-based software to help companies kind of with workplace culture challenges, mainly employee engagement, personal and professional development, and really interesting journey. I mean, back then the culture conversation was a lot different. It was trying to make the business case for culture, which now it's just kind of implied that we should be focusing on culture because it's the DNA of our organization. But back then, before we had software, we would have these executive roundtables to just kind of pressure test ideas and make sure we were building something to help solve unique organizational culture challenges. And we'd have these executive roundtables. They'd start very quiet, and we'd kind of get people talking. We'd ask them kind of a leading question with buzzwords like, back then, tell us about your millennials, or something to get just people opening up. And it was almost like therapy session around culture for these executives. One person would open up, another person would open up, and they would always run late because people would really get really passionate about talking about their people. So I thought that this could be something bigger, maybe a workshop, maybe a half-day event, maybe a conference like it is today. And I pitched my co-founders on it, who initially connected me to Nick. We talked about it, hit it off. Had a lot of common similarities. We went to the same high school. Our grandmas actually went to the same high school a long time ago in Madison. So yeah, we just had a lot of similarities, like-minded individuals. And I pitched Nick. He was kind of the first person I talked to about CultureCon, and he said yes. And we've been built in for over a decade now. It's pretty crazy. It's been quite the roller coaster ride.
What really stood out to me in my first meeting with Zach, where he pitched me on this greater vision, was when he was describing what these executive roundtables were like. It sounded like, once the conversation got going, that the people in the room were so eager and excited to want to help one another solve workplace culture challenges. And when I say help, according to Zach, it was like people being like, well, let me give you tools and templates and connections from my network who I think can help you navigate whatever you got going on. And so Zach, it didn't take much extrapolating for Zach to be like, dude, I think if we just created a container for more of these conversations to happen, that we can still, incubate this level of enthusiasm and kind of altruistic giving to help one another navigate workplace culture. I was like, cool. Sounds like you did all the marketing research for us. How do I help? And I think that's still intact today. The people that come to our events, as you know, Todd, they're so kind and curious and thoughtful, individuals just like yourself. And so it doesn't take a lot of organizing talent to just create a little container for more of these people to be in the same room with one another. And that's where the magic happens.
Was there ever a moment in time where you realized that this is more than an event? This is actually a movement or community?
Yeah, I think early on, just seeing repeat customers or repeat attendees, that's when I kind of started realizing like this is hitting home with a lot of people. People are coming back year after year. I think that's when I figured out too that kind of the essence of those roundtables that Nick was talking about, the community aspect. People were doing things outside of CultureCon together. We saw people start companies together, form other communities, become best friends. So that's what really lights me up is like, obviously I love the amazing speakers and kind of the learning and growth opportunities, but seeing people connect on a really deep level, that just it lights me up and keeps me going with this CultureCon thing.
Well, the validation right out the gate, like Zach and I always have to laugh about our about our inexperience hosting events just based on our very first conference we ever hosted. So after Zach and I had that initial meeting and we got the wheels turning on how we could initially test kind of like building a conference, we didn't jump right to, hey, let's have like a 3-day conference. It was like, okay, well, let's try and see if there's like a test event that we can do that's much smaller scale just to gauge interest among, attendees. And so we planned the event for Valentine's Day during during what happened to be the middle of a pretty big winter snowstorm in Madison, Wisconsin. And I think we were hoping for like 50 people in the room. And Zach, how many people ended up showing up that
think we
day?
had over 100, maybe
Yeah,
110. Yeah.
Wow.
right. And so I think in terms of like what were early indicators that we're tracking to something cool, that for me was like, wow. I mean, either we have a whole bunch of loveless people in our community, or we're tracking to something pretty cool. So yeah.
All right, guys, thanks for sharing that story. And this is a leadership podcast, and so I'm going to ask you a question that I ask every guest, and that's simply this. I want your definition of leadership. Zach, let's start with you. What's your definition of leadership?
That's a good question. Just like a couple key words that pop in my mind. So I guess it's not a definition, but I think clarity, communication, and trust. I think about like the best leaders for organizations that I've been a part of, and they're just so good at um, clearly communicating goals and objectives, building trust with peers and their leadership team and just the company as a whole. And I think about on the flip side, some of the worst leaders I've worked with, and it's like those are the skills missing. So I don't think you necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room to be a leader, but it's about making the people in that room better and leading them, whatever that mission is.
Well, I'm going to steal Zach's word clarity, because what I was originally going to say was something like self introspection, but now I feel like a sense of your own self through clarity is the for the best leaders that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I always felt like they were so in tune to who they are as an individual, knowing what their own intrinsic motivators are and their own personal values, and then knowing how to show up each and every day where they tried their best to bring their best self forward. So having the right relationships and routines and even physical environments where they knew how to bring their best self forward. And then it just, then the leadership just feels infectious because they bring that aura of positivity and altruism and trust, to use another one of Zach's terms. It's just like it's always been so easy for me to follow leaders who I think are just so dialed in to who they are.
All right. So, our topic, leadership and how it creates winning culture. I firmly believe, and I know you guys believe this as well, that leaders are the one that, drive it. And it has to be very intentional or purposeful or by design, because if it's left by default, it's not going to go anywhere. It's actually probably going to go south. So where have you seen leadership fail? Obviously they're not treating it as being intentional, but where have you seen leadership fail in culture when they treat it like a side project?
I would say, forgive me if this is feeling like a cliche statement, but I do find that, an organization's values is more than just posters on the wall, right? So I feel like if it's on the organizational level or on the leadership level, if you're approaching leadership strategy and organizational culture design from a standpoint that feels very transactional and disingenuous, it's going to go off the rails so quickly because people are going to pick that up. And I would say for the environments that I've worked in where it has felt like things were humming, has been in situations where leadership has empowered the employee at every level of the organization to be, let's just say, a culture carrier, that they have enough autonomy to bring their own best self to work in a way that uplifts the values and the behaviors of the organization in a way that feels unique and authentic to them. And it's way easier said than done. But when I break it down, those were the environments that they were humming. It's when people felt like they had the accountability to be a culture carrier themselves.
Zach, anything to add to that?
I think one thing I've seen is, leaders who do treat culture like a side project. A lot of times I see it, to your point, leaders drive the culture, but there's also that like water cooler conversation from the ground up that really influences culture and
Yes.
also drives it. So I think if those two butt heads, it kind of just turns into a disaster. So I think that's why a lot of times people say like hiring for culture fit, culture alignment between leadership and the employee base. I think yeah, those two really need to mesh together because leadership is driving the culture, but the people that are implementing the culture need to feel like they're heard and listened and a part of building that culture from the ground up too.
Absolutely, gentlemen. Yeah, I mean, everybody has a responsibility in creating a great workplace culture, no question. If there was a metric or some sort of signal that leaders should look for when it comes to, looking at culture, what would be a metric or a signal that they should look for?
Yeah, I think back in my early days in the culture world when we were trying to sell Third Space, the culture software into companies, one of our biggest tools for really guiding the conversation and pushing it to the next level. Like a lot of times, maybe we'd start talking to an HR manager or VP of HR, but then we need to get the CEO, president, maybe a CFO involved to actually buy the software. We had an ROI calculator on turnover, and I think that still holds true today. Is looking at your turnover and the high cost associated with that. If people are not happy, they're going to leave the company. So I think that's a big metric to look out for. And then there's a ton of data now in different performance management, employee engagement surveys that you can look at and really dive deep into where your strengths of your culture are and where your weaknesses are, and trying to keep both of those improving. But I think turnover is just like a universal number that people can use. There's a direct ROI, and culture is a big part of that.
Another one that was common in organizations that I worked for in the past was sometimes they didn't call it this, but it was essentially a net promoter score. So having some sort of employee pulse or surveying tool that can understand whether or not an employee would ultimately recommend the organization to friends or family as a good employer. It's so funny. Zach brought this up earlier, but when CultureCon was kind of first getting off the ground, there was still a lot of let's just say for some organizations, the business imperative behind putting time and energy and resources behind workplace culture was still kind of like an unknown. And so to the question you asked, Todd, like these were some of the biggest questions on a lot of our attendees' minds are like, what are objective data points that we can put in front of our leadership team to paint a picture for them on why it's so critical that we need to invest in healthy workplace culture. Like Zach said, like employee retention and employee turnover tended to be, number one, because it's very easy to see the implications of if you have high turnover within your organization. And now, thankfully, it feels like that case has been made pretty clear over the years. But it's not to say that companies still don't need help understanding what those data points are, and not just demonstrate it to leadership, but also to share it with the company as a whole. Because that's when really cool accountability starts to take shape, is if you're surveying your employees and you're getting a sense of what's working and what's not working, to be able to share that out and what's going good and where areas of improvement are and the steps that you're taking to try and improve on it. Like Zach brought up earlier, all that's going to do is create more clarity and trust within the organization. So,
yeah, thanks for sharing that, Nick. Accountability. I want to park on that word there for a moment. It's one of actually our core values. And to your point, I heard it said a few years back, the worst thing you can do as an organization is take a survey and do nothing with it, because you're better off just letting it go, because what you've communicated is, hey, yeah, we're going to ask this, but we're not going to do anything with it. So, erodes trust, one of those things that Zach talked about earlier. So yeah, that accountability is so, so critical in an organization as leaders to say, hey, not only are we going to ask, but here's the steps we're going to do. Here's how we're going to try to move that needle just a little bit more. So when you think about a winning culture, how would you define or describe a winning culture?
Well, I'm going to steal the accountability value for a moment because I work actually the office that I'm sitting in right now, Farwell. One of their core values is accountability, and so I was lucky enough to be on the team that kind of denoted that as being one. And the thing that got us so excited was one of the core attributes of being accountable is to be conflict seeking, which on the surface, you're just like, what? Like uncomfortable adversarial conversations? No, thank you. But at the heart of it, being conflict seeking is to find root truth. And if root truth requires that you have conversations with people that aren't necessarily uncomfortable or even adversarial, they're just intended to be the collective working to identify what's the underlying truth and how do we build off of that. So to answer your question, Todd, the organizations that I've seen be some of the highest performers are ones that are conflict seeking, in that they do not shy away from really digging into what's the root truth that we're all operating from, and then just building on top of that.
Zach, anything to add to that? Winning culture, how would you define winning culture?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I think a winning culture is different for every organization because every organization is made up of these weird humans who are all so different in what their needs and wants are. So I think overall a winning culture is like, in my opinion, it's where I can show up as a human. So I'm allowed to bring my full self to work, not only just work Zach, but who I am at home is kind of how I'm able to show up at work. So you're able to see the full me. And there's a lot of factors that play into that, going back to trust, autonomy, connection, feeling like you're a part of the mission. But I think overall, as long as I can feel like myself, that to me is a winning culture. And a lot of that starts with the individual learning about themselves and how they work best, what their needs are, and finding a company that is a good match for them and meets those needs. But yeah, that's what I feel is a winning culture.
Well said, Zach. Yeah, it's going to look different for different organizations. It's not a cookie cutter type of answer to that. So I appreciate your insights there, Zach. So going back to leaders and being kind of the pace setters, the ones that are going to really have a big influence on the culture, where have you seen leaders fail in this sense, where they think they're doing something culture-wise, but it's like smoke and mirrors? Where have you seen that fail?
There's a couple companies I've worked with where I've seen it fail. I think the intent was good. Like they're trying to provide, larger companies mainly, they try to provide insights into the leadership team, and it may take the form of like a weekly or a monthly leadership team call. But I think like a lot of those calls I've been on, where they're trying to like show who they are as people, kind of backfire because it's not relatable to the average employee. Like one call I was on, I remember it was winter and the whole leadership got on and they were kind of having a conversation and they were talking about their summer homes in Miami and Arizona and like taking the yacht out for a trip. And, most of the employees aren't in that financial situation. So one, I think transparency into leadership is really good, but making sure you're showing the right things that make you more of a human than kind of like push your status as a leader up and makes it harder to connect to. So if you're opening the door to that, make sure that you're opening it with vulnerability and connection and things that can help you relate to the employees that make up your team and your company.
Leadership failures to me, by and large, are moments or situations where the foundation of trust cracks. And, in past experiences, that has taken shape when maybe a leader has data or a truth that's going to be very uncomfortable, if not, very difficult to share with team members or the whole organization. And maybe they tell themselves like, I want to spare my team the uncertainty and the anxiety that may coincide with me sharing this bit of information. But I've always garnished more trust in leadership when hard truths come out as transparent as they possibly can. I'm not advocating that all the time leaders have to share every bit of information with the whole company. That doesn't make sense and it's not realistic. But when leaders have been on all company calls or even in team meetings, where if an employee asks a question and they don't know the answer to it, it's perfectly fine to say, I actually don't know. And I'm going to look into that for you and get back to you, or find the right opportunity to share information when it feels appropriate. But that's the thing. Like when you feel like information's hidden from you or decisions are being made that are devoid of employee creativity or thought or buy-in is when the foundation cracks to me.
Nick, Zach, wow, both of that. I mean, your answers there were rich, and it's got me reflecting a little bit and thinking. We just had an all-company meeting last week in which our CEO and founder stood up in front of the organization. I think it's so critical to that point of being transparent, of just being real, and talking about, hey, this is where we're going. There's going to be some hard things, but it's the hard things that kind of make us better, the challenges and everything like that. And then Zach, when you were talking about that humanist aspect of leadership, and actually, I'm going completely off script here, so forgive me on this one. But the origin story of Haverchat came on a drive home from Madison, Wisconsin in 2024.
Hey.
I actually got on the call with Graydon, our producer, director over here, and I said, hey, Graydon, I got this idea. I want us to find a way for us to get our leaders a little bit more human in front of our team members. I want them to hear their stories. I want them to be able to connect, and so that was the origin story of Haverchat. And we did 8 episodes where we had our founder and our CEO Brent Haverkamp on. We had our COO Paul Wilkin on, and then just a myriad of other key executives. And through all that, you just saw that humanness, and next thing you know, team members are like, oh, I kind of know something a little bit more about this leader, and there's just that connectiveness. So, just thought I'd share that little shout out
That's
to
awesome.
CultureCon as being part of and I don't remember what speaker it was that just said something about that humanist factor that just got the gears of grinding in my head on that. So
Love that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, actually, let's talk about CultureCon for a little bit, because it has been so influential in my growth as a leader. I've been sitting in this role now for 4 years as the Chief Culture Officer, and again, going back to that 2024 experience, I was just overwhelmed, just really excited about that experience. Went back again in 2025, and as people ask me about what makes it so special, and you guys hit on it already, but I call it my 3 C's when I talk about CultureCon. The first one is the celebration aspect, where getting together with a bunch of culture geeks. That's what we call each other there in Madison on that weekend. Oh, you got the Culture Geek shirt on. I love it. I thought about wearing mine, Zach. I really did. But there's just something about celebrating with a bunch of people who are very passionate about what they do and how they want to create places where people can show up and be the best version of themselves. The things we've already talked about. The second thing is the content. That's my second C, is the people that get up in front and share at the different sessions. I always come away with several pages of notes that just, one, they might be affirming the things that we're doing. They might be things that challenge me to think differently in what we're doing, but the content's always great. And the third thing would be the thing that I think is the best part, at least for me, is the connections that I make, the relationships. I'm somebody who believes personally that iron sharpens iron. And so when I can get around a bunch of other men and women who are really good at what they do, man, it makes me better. So, all right, well, I guess that was a plug for CultureCon. But yeah, what do you think? You talked about it, I guess, a little bit already, but I really want to know what makes an event like CultureCon so special for those leaders who are intentional about culture?
I personally want to steal your three C's because that's like what we talk about all the time is like
Go
people
ahead,
come for the content, the rich content, the amazing speakers, but they come back because of the community and the people that they connect with and meet. And it's just one big culture celebration. So like you hit every aspect of my favorite parts of CultureCon with the three C's. But yeah, I think it's special because of people like you that come. I mean, Nick touched on this earlier, but we lucked out with the caliber of human who attends the event. Like if you're at CultureCon, you're there because you care about the people you work with. You want to make work better for everyone. So you're already there because you have this altruistic view of work and humanity. So right off the bat, you're coming into a room full of energy and love and just people who want to do the right thing. So yeah, Nick and I just lucked out with the people that are in that room.
I love how you said iron sharpens iron. I feel like that's the magic. When Zach and I have, sat down and tried to study the art and the science of pulling off a conference, that's where the accountability sits. It's like, you can come to the event and you can get, really great information from these speakers who try and make the content very practical and actionable. But if I were to imagine myself in the audience at our own event, my enthusiasm for wanting to go back to work and do those things would be more aligned with the people that I attended the conference with. And that whole idea of iron sharpens iron and feeling like you're a part of a broader community of like-minded individuals who want to make a difference in the work that they receive themselves and for their teams and organizations as a whole. And so that's the connections is it, Todd. I mean, that's top of the pyramid for sure.
That's the secret sauce right there.
That's it. Yep.
Okay. So Nick, Zach, we've got a leader listening to this podcast, and they're asking this question. So I want you to answer this question. What's one habit I can do as a leader, just one habit that I can do as a leader to help, build culture?
I got it. I was feeling guilty because I'm the guy on this episode that just keeps talking about accountability, which is that Zach will tell you how not accountable I am all the time.
Very accountable.
Yeah, like one thing that we call it at CultureCon, culture from the inside out, which is this idea that if we can create accountability to ourselves to find a daily practice or a daily ritual that allows us to bring our best self forward, that is going to be in the greatest service to you and to those that you work with, if not your entire organization as a whole. And I can tell you from my own personal experience as somebody who is, pretty eager to want to go down the whole self introspective path and understand my personality traits and do all that stuff. It can also be pretty scary if you do it at a certain depth, because sometimes it can be the case where you're learning more about your strengths and your values and your passions and what the world needs, and you kind of are at this decision point where you're like, well, how does this align with the lifestyle, the relationships, the work choices I've made? Is there alignment? Is there not alignment? If there's not alignment, what does that mean for me? Right. So that's where a little bit of the anxieties and scariness come from. But I can tell you from personal experience, going through that myself and coming out on the other side of it and having so much more autonomy and accountability to myself to now know what I have to do to allow my best self to come forward. I have so much more confidence that I can be a better leader when I know that I'm accessing that best part of Nick. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying, if a leader out there can start the process of creating a daily habit where they can find something where that better piece of themselves can come forward, maybe that's, a coffee with a friend, it's exercise, whatever it is that you can, quote unquote, like treat yourself every day to allow that person to come forward, that has my vote.
Zach.
Not sure how to follow that one. I can try. I think if I'm the leader of an organization, there's so many people that influence culture. I mean, everyone, right? But there's like key stakeholders that are going to have more of an influence than others. And I think it's really like those middle managers. So someone that is a leader, maybe they're younger, maybe they're not. But a lot of times, as like that's where like culture breaks, is we have the water cooler conversation that bubbles up. We have the leader at the top who's kind of preaching down. And then there's this kind of break in some of the people in between that are leaders of departments, some of those teams. And a lot of times they've just been there long enough where they've gotten a promotion to get there and don't have the right leadership training to be in that position. I don't think anyone wakes up and they're like, I want to be a bad leader. Like, I'm going to ruin this company. I'm going to ruin this team. This person's going to hate working here. Like, I don't think that's a thing. Like, I think people want to lead people the right way and they want to like make their teams better, but some people just don't have the right skill set or training. So I think it comes back to the leaders at the top, making sure that your middle managers and people who are kind of in between have the right skill sets, have the right leadership training. And that's an ongoing thing that should be happening continuously throughout the year. Right. But I think that's one habit, maybe not for the leader themselves, but to put on other leaders to keep this leadership training going. And if you can like have a sturdy middle line, it just helps bridge the culture of the top down and the bottom up, and everything's working right. So that's what I've seen work the best in my career so far.
Oh, gentlemen, I'm smiling, ear to ear here, because you hit on what we really strive for here at Haverchat. And so it's just that affirming, component that we have our own in-house leaders in training. We call it LIT. And we've been doing that since 2018. And one of the very first things we say is that the hardest person you're ever going to lead is yourself. So to your point, Nick, you got to know thyself, know thyself. And that can be a scary place sometimes. But when you know yourself, then you're going to be able to, and take care of yourself. You're going to be able to be a better leader. And then to your point, Zach, this, leaders in training that we do, it's all about that middle layer, to use your phrase. We look across the horizon, we look for those emerging leaders or people who are coming in from outside the organization, that somebody we didn't promote from within, but somebody who's at that manager level, and we want to pour into them for that entire year and invest in them. But it's just not a one and done. I mean, it's ongoing that you have to keep doing that, because you're right, Zach. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to suck today. I really don't want to be a good leader, No, right. It just, yeah. So really appreciate your insights. Okay. So the closing question is this. Again, there's a leader listening and you gave them one thing. Can you think of some just real practical strategies that, hey, in the next 30 days, maybe it's the next quarter, maybe it's the next year, if you could pick some strategies to help, grow the culture in an organization, what would be those tangible strategies?
I'll give a book recommendation if I'm going to dovetail on what I just shared in the previous question. There's this book. It's called My Little Ikigai Journal. So Ikigai is the Japanese term for kind of like your purpose in life, or your reason for being. And it truly is a journal. So each day there's a different thought experiment, reflection, question for you. Some of them are pretty easy to answer and others are very difficult. But by the end of the book, you'll have been able to identify some really core themes about who you are as an individual, and tie that to, maybe what the world needs, where your skills play a role, your values, your intrinsic motivators. So if I want to get really practical, I'm excited to encourage people to try this book, and it takes probably 30 days to get through. So by the end of the 30 days, you're going to have some pretty good insights
Oh,
into
wow.
how you're wired. So that's my recommendation, my book
All right.
club recommendation.
Solid. That's solid, Nick. Zach, what would be your practical strategy?
Probably come to CultureCon, meet other like-minded individuals. Shameless plug. Half kidding though, because I feel like just find other like-minded individuals that are interested in this topic. In kind of like our early days when we were doing executive roundtables, like share best practices, share stories where things haven't worked and where things have worked, because just because something doesn't work at your organization, it could be a really good idea that helps another organization that may be a different size or industry. So I think that sharing best practices aspect is huge for culture building. On a real note, I think hiring someone like yourself, like a chief culture officer, a director of culture, employee experience, someone that like quote unquote owns culture and is kind of the person who is championing it internally, really day in and day out, is vital. I know sometimes smaller companies may not have budget, but it's such an important position because without it, I do think it can get lost. It gets, maybe bundled under HR or a leadership. One leader is really passionate about it, but they have a million things going on. So I'm a big proponent of the chief culture officer, chief people officer, who can really make sure that's really ingrained in the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, Zach, I am very fortunate, very blessed to have an organization that thinks that way, that they see it as, a strategy to have a seat around that table is very special. And I know it's somewhat unique in some regards. Not every organization does that, so I don't want to take that for granted. All right, so as we wrap up, is there something you wish you would have said that you didn't say? Now's your chance, Nick.
This is so corny, but I'm going to do it. Thank you. Thank you, Todd. I like
Oh,
sincerely thank you, not only for this episode, obviously, but you are like the perfect mold and example of the type of caliber of human that comes to our event. And when you've come over the past years, like just being around you, you're so quick to give praise. You're connecting with other people. You bring this infectious joy to the conference, and you're so eager to want to learn and grow yourself that, like, selfishly, Zach and I need to see that happen for us to be in the moment and get out of our own neuroses around conference management and planning. And so, like, truly, like, a sincere thank you to you for showing up the way that you do and being an inspiration to us and everybody else that comes to our event. So I'm glad I said it.
well, thank you, Nick. Really appreciate you saying those kind words. I was not going for that, but
I
I'm
knew
going
you
to
were.
accept it.
I
Thank
knew you were. Yep.
Zach, what would you like to say that you hadn't said that you wish you could now?
I'll first start by co-signing the statement Nick just said. Thank you
All
very
right.
much, Todd.
All right.
I would say also, if you're interested in this topic, there's so many free resources out there to just like get the wheels turning. Whether it's CultureCon, we have a lot of free resources. There's also other communities too, like Culture First, the Connection Crew, Transform. There's so many people doing great work in this space that most people want to help other people who are in this space too. So if you're ever interested in just like finding out more about workplace culture and how to make work suck less, as we like to say, reach out to Nick or myself. We'll connect you with people. We'll get you in the CultureCon community. There's a lot of people who want to help others. So just take that first leap. And it doesn't matter if you're in HR or you're a director of culture. You could be in accounting. You could be in finance. You could be the janitor at a high school. You influence culture. So start learning about it and see how you can make work better.
I'm going to go off script here again and look over here at Graydon and say, hey, can we put some of that content or some of those references probably in the comments or something when we get that on YouTube? Awesome. I'm getting a head nod. Okay. Because that's a lot of stuff that you just said there, Zach, Nick, and we want to make sure that those who are listening have the ability to, hit some links and get to those places that you just talked about. Again, thank you so much for being a part of history today. Our guest here on our first virtual recording, our first outside guest. Really appreciate your insights and your thoughts. And I love what you guys are doing in the world of organizational culture. Keep up the great work.
Thanks is all ours, Todd.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Todd.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And to our listeners, I want to thank you for joining us today on Haverchat, a leadership podcast. We hope that today's conversation inspires you to better understand how leadership plays such a key role in creating a winning culture. Be sure to follow Haverchat as we continue to have more conversations with leaders who are making a difference each and every day. So until next time, keep leading with purpose.